have 6:04.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, 6:04. Yeah, you're right. The laptop is probably more accurate.
3 to 4 inches to make it see.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order at 6:04, committee of the whole. And the only item on our agenda tonight is to discuss next steps in the deciding about committee structure. So there was a memo in our packet with policy. And would you like to introduce it further?
You know, I do have one update.
Okay.
This kind of came together this afternoon, and it was in response to some questions that were out there that I think we've always had with respect to future items of consideration. And it was in the two options that staff were just kind of brainstorming. And it was further down in the policy page for them, but both of those options require that any new initiatives or changes to existing initiatives need to get cleared through the board. And I don't think that that was clear for people, because the same would also apply to the work that we would do in standing committees. So what I had done, and this is, I said to Tyler, I'm like, I had this in a memo in October. I'm sure they all have it by their nightstand. But just in case, I just kind of printed that out a little bit because it called out just a procedure of which we would go through. Prioritization of items is great, and not consensus, but majority of the board is also good. But we need to have a process that evaluates if there are changes, how do we evaluate those changes? And a part of the feedback I've heard consistently over the last year is that sometimes the staff always isn't informed or included in that process, so it's hard for us to provide feedback or let you know how we could be limber and accommodating or what it impacts.
So Rebecca, could you break that down a little bit further for me?
Sure.
So trustees propose initiatives, so any changes to those initiatives then need to go back through the board in order to go back down to the committee, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
However, there's a couple of, what I'm going to focus you on is the hyphenated points at the bottom. And this kind of summarizes it.
No.
To change an initiative would require consensus by the manager, and consensus, not necessarily majority, whatever, but by the board. Okay, so that assures that we're having that communication. And I always know that then I'll have an ability to share with you how it may impact a work plan or not, because so many of our items have ripple effects on other projects. To tweak an action plan, which is kind of an internal document for us keeping on track together of an initiative, would require consensus by the manager and the project leader. Usually they're smaller in scope that aren't germane to the larger policy. To eliminate an initiative, because it's always a possibility, something may happen which may cause us to say, you know what, we don't want, now that's changed our perspective, we may not want to focus on this right now, would require consensus by the manager and the board. And then to add an initiative again would require consensus by the manager and the board. So, and that came up within the scope, I think, of a concern that was being expressed to me of, you know, with standing committees, there was a concern that all of a sudden a bunch of new things were going to come up during the scope of a standing committee that would change the work level or focus and impact in the department without the board actually having some, and David is always great at reminding, you know, me of this, like sometimes it's just nice to have the conversation, right? I want to know whether the board in general is on board with this or not, because why would we want to waste our time, right? So it kind of always, while it allows the committees to do their individual work or chairs to have different focus, it always assures that there's been communication or dialogue or some overall direction. And what it also does is that it helps all the trustees be in the know. So this was a concern that was brought to my attention that I wasn't aware, because I wasn't here for a long time under the old structure. But someone, you know, had reflected and said, well, sometimes things would end up on a committee agenda and none of us would know about it. And we wouldn't have context in terms of what that meant.
Can you, I mean, I think the point is that we all need to talk together about this. So when you say, like, someone said, you know, rather than it being filtered through you, I would appreciate if whoever said it, you know, says it to the group rather than filtering comments through you to us. you know, because I think the communication has to happen between us.
Great point.
So if you're, so, I mean, please continue, but when you bring up comments that board members are saying to you and you say them to someone, you know, I think that's kind of getting in the way of us having a direct communication on the issue.
Sure. I can conclude, that was what I was going to do. That was really all I had. But I can answer any questions that you may have.
Question. Oh, I'm chairing the meeting, so I will.
Right.
Trustee Marsh.
Yeah, it says the consensus by the village manager and the board. There may be things the board just, decides they wanna do. I don't know.
So here's where I'm coming
If
from.
you
from
said
that
no and we
perspective.
said yes,
Right. Well, a lot of times it's a matter of what happens administratively in that scope. So one aspect that maybe there wasn't a good check and balance was decisions getting made, but then all of a sudden there not being a full explanation of what impact that may have. So you may decide that you want to go in a direction. Great. I'll be able to share with you what that does or what may need to be adjusted. I can't, in order for us to best work together, I need to know that there's gonna be that dialogue. Because if not, it's also unrealistic to not understand what impact a decision may have.
But that sounds more like with input from the
input
village
from the
manager.
village manager.
And that could be it too.
Yeah.
But I need to make sure that there's an opportunity for that dialogue. It's to your, and maybe sounds the way that it's written, like it's me wanting to insert myself in your decision process, but it's more to ensure that as an organization, that's a part of the role that we have here together. And me reporting to you and coming back.
Right.
That would be an expectation, if I were you, that I would have of me.
Because in my mind, that seems very reasonable to have that dialogue and to have that conversation, because I think as a trustee, I'm hearing different things from residents of different, you know, as things come up, and that may shift our focus, and that may have, you know, having a dialogue, I think, is very different than having a consensus. So I mean, I think that that's reasonable to have a conversation about, okay, so if we shift our focus to this, like what needs to kind of pause over here versus, you know, that's not something that we can even discuss at committee, where maybe we're discussing it, but figuring out where that fits in the bigger plan. I think that the consensus part is really, I think, the struggle for me a little bit.
Yeah, what's the input, consensus of the board with
I'm fine with input.
considerable input, or, yeah, totally, we need to know if we do this,
Input
what
and advice.
advice and
That would be great.
directions.
For me, it just assures that we're gonna have a
Oh.
touch point,
Oh,
Sure.
absolutely.
you know?
So some kind of jargon about organizational assessment. I mean, that's maybe more formal, but it seems like what you want to do is just to share that perspective, which I appreciate, because there are times when I just say no to something just because I haven't heard what the staff has to say, you know, and so
Yeah.
I might, if I have that, if I know that I'm going to get that opportunity, then it could be a different outcome.
So, David, if you could just remember what you just said. You said input and
Advice.
advice. Is that valid? That is great.
Right, yeah.
For me, I'm just concerned about the touch point.
So, Ann,
Oh,
so I apologize I missed this part, but the two ways that an item can get on the COW agenda, the first one is, are we assuming that this annual, that it's going to be an annual process?
Yeah, that was my question,
Yes, I
and, yeah.
I know, you were really first.
I'm being patient, right, because I agree, I mean, I think we need to talk about the conversation process and maybe tweak it a little bit, and also, because for this year, we really didn't we didn't get to the point where we were voting on things and coming to conclusions on things, so I don't even know what, you know, we're excluded from bringing up anything, but I don't even know what the list is that we prioritize, so seems hard to implement.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm. And I also don't wanna make the assumption that we're going to go through the process in the same way that we did last, that was the first time. So that's, it's not really, and that's the inaugural if we're going to go with an
Sure.
annual. So I would hate for the only, for that to be one, it's not really an option.
I think, could I say,
Yeah.
that phrase is kind of a placeholder for a process, but it's not referring to that exact process. I think we had a memo in our previous last meeting that talked about some changes, or we had emails or something. So, to your point, I just want to
Right.
say that that's kind of like the language about the process, but not.
And I imagine this was already discussed, and props to those of you who did bring it up. Just kidding. But the other option being that we have to have a majority, and that's what you guys are saying.
That's what's in front of us, that we're in discussion of.
Right, and I understand that if it sounded like it was wrapping up.
No, we were, if I may, we were talking about down here, which would be sort of the touch point between staff and the board,
Sure.
so that we can make an informed decision about whether we'd like to assume.
Can I ask a question based on
Yeah.
Katie's comment? So consensus, does that mean just a majority, or does that mean, unanimous? Does it mean a supermajority? Maybe it's obvious as you read through this, but I just want to make sure that I completely understand what we're talking about.
Well, I had presumed that would be 4,
Okay,
at
so,
least 4. However, if you guys want to further define that, let me know whether, like, supermajority or,
just the wording, I was reading consensus to mean, consensus could be read to mean unanimous.
Yeah.
Sure, okay, so let's
Majority.
clarify that. How would you like to,
Have a majority.
Majority.
okay,
So, I mean, I do agree that, we should, even in committee, we probably shouldn't spend time talking about something unless there's 4 votes. Not necessarily 4 votes in favor, but 4 votes to at least talk about something.
Yeah.
So I guess if we were to go with that, then if you as a committee chair, assuming we had standing committees, or to bring something to the cow, to bring, then it comes up at items for future agenda, you make a motion to include it on the next agenda, it's seconded, and there's 4 votes, and then I guess you would make a motion specifically where it should go, whether the committee or cow or what. I mean, it's a little different than the way we used to, but I do think it makes sense to know that at least there's 3 other trustees who want to talk about it, So.
Trustee
I guess I like what you're saying, but one of the things that is hard to, I guess, reconcile for me would be that this might be the first time that some of the people have heard one of these items. So I would hate for something not to advance because people don't understand the subject material. And that's part of the whole process of having the committees and the discussion is it informs a lot of people. So none of us should really come to this job, knowing everything. So we're learning from each other. But if we can't discuss things because majority of people don't want to discuss them based on X, Y, or Z and we don't even know, then I'm not really sure how much we're, sharing our knowledge.
Yeah, I think it is a balance between spending a ton of time and spending enough time so that we can make an informed decision about whether we want to proceed. So I don't know what that needle is, where it gets to be excessive in preparation for the board. But to your point, yeah, if there were a policy and we had no memo about it and there was no context, I would have a hard time. I would probably say, oh, sure, we can talk about it. But
Right.
that may not mean that, I probably would lean in favor of, yeah, I can't believe I would just say absolutely not.
So I guess if
But then I might
trustees
think-
have to prepare this stuff in advance, so we're talking about a whole new level. None of us have staff or employees at our disposal. So that's, anyway.
so so let's say run through that example. One of the things that would be really helpful for me is a lot of times, when some stuff does come up in your future consideration of agenda items, it's at the end of the night, I don't know about you, but sometimes I get a little tired. But in general, people are trying to get at what they want to proceed with. So they throw something out, and we, to Trustee Kate's point, we get to a point, people say, yes, let's talk about that. It then allows an opportunity for me to follow up with that trustee, because typically, and I'm only speaking from my own perspective, sometimes I don't know the breadth of what they're going for, right? So I have a hard time speaking intelligently to that at that night, or taking a look at the work plans to say, what does that do or not do? Maybe it's not a big deal, and I'm just, that to me is like the touch point of just wanting that opportunity to do that. And then we could list it again under that trustee report and have the trustee come forward, and then if there were information that we had, because sometimes, this is also the dynamic of me being newer, you know, I'm going back to see what have we done before, right? So I don't have the luxury of being here and knowing everything we've done over the last 30 years. So I know in order to be best prepared for you and as a group and to kind of have that perspective, I need to do that due diligence, you know? And so that way it allows me to also provide, not like in great length, but provide some general concept to the trustee who's bringing it up, and also allows me to ask you questions, you know, or maybe there's, I don't know, maybe-
Maybe we can agenda it for,
yeah, and then it would allow the board to hear whatever more specifically is being
Right.
requested.
without the.
Because usually it's a general topic that's
Yeah.
mentioned, but it's not accompanied by a specific request.
Which is appropriate, because under that agenda item, it can lead into discussion very quickly, and then we're not.
Right, that's why it only says future agenda, it doesn't say, oh, we're gonna discuss them,
Right.
you know, it just puts it on there.
Okay.
But, just an option.
Trustee Warren?
I was just kind of thinking, just kind of conceptually, have you ever thought of, and maybe this is a bad idea, you know, it's something new, have you ever thought about moving items for future consideration up?
Well,
Because, you know, when that comes up, it's usually 11 o'clock at night, and I don't think anybody's, you know, fully 100%. So maybe if it's something where we want to really do, I realize we don't want to get into a huge discussion of it, but if we at least want to have, you know, 5 minutes of, is this worth bringing up, maybe it's a little better, a little fresher.
yeah.
That could be, what do you guys think?
I also don't think, you know, I don't think any of us are like have wild and crazy, wacky, waste of time ideas. I mean, and I would assume that, I mean, I usually talk to a couple people before not more than 2 people. but I will usually run something by 1 or 2 board members before I go, you know, I'm just not sure that I'm not that worried about any of us bringing, you know, way out in left field items that the rest of us, you know, and I think, you know, we kind of, just out of courtesy, if, you know, something is important to someone and feels that it should be considered, that the rest of us, not all the time, but, you know, most of the time, would just extend that courtesy to say, yeah, we can have a discussion about it. I mean, so I'm okay with, you need to get 3 other people to vote with you to discuss something. But I'm not too worried about this as an issue, frankly.
So the way that it's written is sufficient,
Well,
provides enough guidance.
you know, we haven't talked about the prioritization process, you know, and I don't know what the priorities are, so that part, I think we need to probably have, you know, a further discussion about how we want to do prioritization. So I'm not sure about that part, but I think just for now, you know, if we were to go back to committees, I'm okay with saying these are items. And I do think we have a lot on the committee agendas that we probably did not need to have, so I think we could try to really be a lot more, you know, stingy about what we put on committee agendas, and if there's not anything to talk about, we don't need to have a committee, you know, so.
So,
Yeah.
oh,
Sorry. So just for my understanding, if it is not, related to what we identified as our strategic initiatives or focus items for 2019, that is not something that could be discussed, or is that something, like, if a trustee brings that up for items for future consideration, we could have the discussion, then get it to committee if 4 people warrant or agree. That would be the process. So it would really be, you know, probably a month and a half before we get to committee, right? In theory, be a month. Like you put it up for future,
Yeah.
then the
Yeah.
next meeting.
Yeah. It's not for timely, for fires. Yeah, fires and
Right.
heart surgery.
Right.
They're not good for that.
You could
Yeah.
bring it up at one meeting and have the vote at that meeting and then have it on the next meeting agenda.
I don't think so, right?
You can't, or?
Because it's not an agenda item.
It's right, it's not an agenda item. You don't know it's coming.
So it would have to be,
So we
It's
can,
not specifically listed on.
So we'd have to bring it up under items for future agenda, and on the next agenda, have it listed on the
Yep.
agenda, refer to committee this item.
Mhm.
yeah,
So I mean, that kind of to your
It's
point,
cumbersome.
it is, but to your point, like, nobody's gonna do that for some like outlandish thing that is not real and worth exploring. You know, we're gonna really be talking about this for a month and a half before it even gets to, or a month before it gets to committee.
Well, could we request on the agenda to say items for future agenda, and then put, let's say I wanted to put, you know, a resolution on whatever, and so we could request to put on the agenda, item for future agenda, blah, 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 and then we can vote on it at that meeting.
Right.
Just list it on the agenda.
I think that then would entail on our part, getting some understanding of what you're requesting, what that entails. Like for us, it's just, like for me, it's just a lack of understanding a lot of times in terms of what the topic encompasses for you. So it would just require some upfront communication between us.
but probably just like a paragraph or something, right? It probably don't need a complete essay on it, it's more of a, this is what I want to discuss. So.
Sorry, but to your point about having the time to get together the knowledge and whatnot, sorry, just had some chocolate. I don't think there would be, what would there be that we would need that would necessitate like such an expedited process? Like, I don't think, I guess what I'm saying is if there's something that's urgent that we need to get on the next committee, then that's probably something that staff would bring up to us anyway. I mean, I guess, so I have no problem waiting, you know, the extra time, but I also like the idea of being able to get it on and listed on the agenda, either or, but I don't know that I would want to assume that it's automatically going to be or included in the next board meeting.
Oh, to defer to committee?
No, well,
Well, let's take your resolution on marijuana,
Sure.
you know, I mean, so right now, you would have to bring it up as an item for future agenda, and then wait 2 weeks for it to be somehow listed on the agenda for us to vote. So it would be a month after you brought it up before it would actually be even discussed at a meeting.
which I think is quick for government, but
Well, in this scenario, Tammy, trustee Buckles, did bring it up, December 17th, right? So we were planning on listing it then. Again, I reached out to her, hoping that we were gonna connect. She was unable to make the first meeting in January. And there was some more information, like I wanted to go through that discovery period with her, right? You know, get familiar, and we'll still reach out about it, but we had some email communication, and then it was, you know, I reached out to her and said, hey, I'm looking at the agendas, you know, I didn't hear that this was time sensitive, we have this going on, you know, I've benchmarked it for this, let me know if there's a problem. You know, and then we, you know, continued to follow up in terms of information relative to that throughout the rest of the week. So, I guess I'm sharing that with you because it was a real life situation, and I don't know how all of you feel about any of that. Like the topic in general, but like, you know, about what you would be able to expect, I guess, from me throughout the course of that process.
Did you want to respond? I have two thoughts I'd like to share. One is that most likely if you know enough about something to bring it up as a future item for consideration, then most likely you could have a few sentences ready that, you know, you're probably going to have enough understanding to articulate, you know, to start that. So I think that's in terms of, you know, having it on the same agenda that night, or having it listed and kind of presenting the idea. I think that can work. I think what's really important, whether we have it, you know, split over two, procedurally over 2 meetings versus 1 meeting, is just that conversation with the village manager happens so that she's in a better position to really help us, you know, take the next step. I see it as positioning, you know, so if allowing it over 2 meetings helps with that positioning to help everybody move forward, that's great. If it can happen in 1 meeting, I think that's reasonable too. And I like the idea about having it listed because it kind of puts it on us that we really need to be thinking ahead, and working with staff and President Razik around meeting management and agenda management. So I really, really like that, having it listed. Because sometimes you do just think of something halfway through the meeting and, oh yeah, I wanted to bring this up, and it's just not the best way to proceed necessarily. So thinking ahead is good.
So, I mean, if you're immediately doing it and move into discussion of the topic without not being provided information, you have the general idea. I'm just thinking, we're gonna decide, we're gonna proceed on something without really having, we have a concept of the idea, then we're gonna bring it up in the college or the committee the next time? I mean, once it's gone out to the committee.
I mean, I think the question is how, if there's something that we, as trustees want to pursue
Right.
to improve village government or, make a resolution about something, whatever. And I mean, yes, ideally we would go through prioritization, bring up what our personal issues are, and we'd all talk about it in that process, and it would come through there. Now, if something comes up after that, then, I mean, I think it's really just a question if there's something near and dear to us that we want to get on the table for discussion, how do we do that? I mean, another tweak on this is, I think that, sometimes the things that staff bring, it may be useful for the committee chair to have some involvement with. For example, like we had 2 discussions about Wilson Drive budget, and we're over budget, and where are we gonna get the money? I think we had that discussion twice, and it ended up that we weren't over budget. So, I mean, I think it's possible that, that first and that second time that the Public Works Chair may have said, well, let's, that might have been more appropriate to kind of talk about in committee, but not really take the board's time to go over this until we had the final budget, which because we really didn't need to have those 2 discussions about we're over budget on Wilson Drive.
Right.
So I really think, I mean, I found when I was Public Works Chair after a while, and you're on those issues all the time, it's not, that chair might have some input on, is this really the right thing to be bringing, to the full board and taking the full board time on. Let's throw that out there.
Yeah. So we're, President Razik is just getting settled. What do you need from us? First of all, has everybody weighed in that has something to say? And then next, what do you need from us?
Are we on standing committees? I'm gonna have Trustee McCabe continue to chair the CAL meeting.
No, we're talking about the process for a trustee to get something on the agenda.
Oh.
That either that if it's not on our prioritization list, and recognizing that we don't really have one for this year, but and that we still need to discuss our prioritization process. But all that aside, if it's not on that agreed upon list at the beginning of the year and something else comes up, how do you? And we talked about bringing it up at future agenda items, but then putting it on the agenda for the vote the next meeting, and then you would have to get 4 votes, and then it can go to committee or whatever. So it would be a month after you present something.
So in the past, I thought about this a lot. In the past, I have various versions of future agenda item charts that the House manager used to put together. So they became more elaborate as time went on before he left, but probably because we were demanding more. But
it's like 70 or 80 items.
Yeah. No, the last one I had was like 24, so it must have literally, he started saying it was complete when it wasn't. It was like done.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyways, that was a little different, and I'll explain how it changed. But the benefit of that was future agenda items originated at the full board. And so we did spend about 2.5 years, or I personally spent about 2.5 years trying to figure out what is the proper procedure for getting an agenda item to go to committee. And finally, Nathan, at the end of 2017, just said, it's so simple. you make a motion during future agenda items, you get a second, you discuss what that motion is, like I wanna put this legalizing marijuana. I wanna put that on to be discussed at a future agenda. And you get a second, and then they say, well, what is it? You can explain, and then you vote whether you wanna put it on a future agenda.
You're right on.
Okay.
I think that's what we've been.
Oh, perfect, because then it originated at the top, and then it goes down to me, and then the committee chair really can work with staff to come up with the materials to be used and, you know, how it's gonna be organized. I just worry if, when I read it, that it was, if we have 6 different committee chairs making their own agenda with staff and then it going up, I feared that it'd get to Rebecca and I and there'd be too much, and then we're in the position of saying, you can't have that, and then that's authoritarian, it's not
Yeah, that's
fun.
not gonna work.
There is gonna be a workload management issue. There's
Oh.
no
Well, that's how
doubt
this
about
conversation
Yeah,
started. I'm like,
yeah.
I'm having
Yeah,
deja
once-
vu.
yeah,
Because I remember
right.
sitting in my
80.
interview, and I remember looking at Trustee Backhorst and saying,
Yeah, we gotta,
there's way too much. And you can do a lot of things, but you can't do everything at the same time well.
Mhm.
So,
So I think that's gonna still be a frustration, to be honest, no matter what the,
Yeah.
you know, and I think, you know, it's really incumbent upon us as a board to be sensitive to that and just patient, you know? There's just only so much, and it's not a reflection of a lack of support, but what's, you know, and just having the faith that we are gonna do our best to move through things and move them up the list.
Yeah, I mean, we still have had future agenda items on our agenda since, we've never taken that off, even though we had talked about taking it off, and we don't have a big list going. So I think that we're doing pretty well, but again, it's more still centralized where you do it at the board level, and so whatever everybody wants to do with committees, whatever format it is, if we can just keep agenda management at the board level, and then the work could go to committees, that would be very helpful. I think it will cause a lot less conflict, and honestly, I mean, Rebecca and I talk to each of you all the time, so if you know, I would say to Trustee Bachner, oh yeah, well, it's not gonna be on this agenda, but, you know, it's gonna be in this, and here's why, and this is what Rebecca said, and so it's not that there's not communication right now. We are trying to get it, whatever we can get on the agendas we get on.
And I just wanted to kind of, to back up that point, I think that especially if you don't have a prioritization process that clearly identifies priorities, and we didn't really get to those priorities that we all wanted to pursue this year, I think it becomes more important to centralize what initiatives you're going to be doing. So I think it is important to have that at the board, because, you know, if we don't pick our priorities through the prioritization process, this really becomes the avenue by which we're going to prioritize things. So I think the whole board probably wants to see that.
I kind of just wanna, I mean, I do think we need to talk about if we wanna go to committees or stay with the CAB, because if we go to committees, and committees only meet once a month, and it takes a month to get something on a committee agenda. And you miss that, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
that could be like 6 to 8 weeks before, you know, and I just, you know, that's, I mean, I see committees as a structure for us to do work, and if, you know, and to be a little more nimble than we can be with all 7 of us sitting around, coming to an agreement on something. So I would hate to see a process that takes you 6 weeks between when you have an idea and would like to discuss something as chair of a committee before you can be talked about.
2 things, I also forgot to say. One is not, just because someone's a chair of JP&L doesn't mean that another trustee doesn't have just as urgent of a desire to get a resolution on the agenda as the chair of that committee. So that's one of the reasons that, like, just because you're the chair, you know, you may want to have something on an agenda of a different committee, and someone else might want to have something on your committee. So I don't think that's.
I mean,
if you
we're
own that.
all agreeing that it should that you shouldn't arbitrarily on your own be able to put something on a committee agenda. We're all agreeing
Yeah.
that it has to come up at a board meeting, and you have to have 3 other people agree with you, yes, we should discuss that.
Yeah.
The point is, my point is, if we have to talk about it at one meeting, have it actually on the agenda at the next meeting, and it's agended for a committee, so that's already 4 weeks, and if you miss the deadline for your committee, that's 6 weeks. That is too cumbersome of a process.
So before you were here, we were talking about that it couldn't be, that was my question, could you bring it up at future items to be considered and
Yeah.
vote on it in the same meeting?
No.
And so Rebecca was saying, no, because it's not
on the
agenda.
agenda. But
So,
let me give you a good example, because she does write this in her memo, because I've read it a million times. If for any reason there's an urgency, meaning there is a timing problem, so we need to pass a proclamation or a resolution or whatever because, or there's a referendum coming up, I'm gonna keep using legalizing marijuana, even though that's not even what the agenda item was. But just, so if the referendum's coming up in a month and we need to talk about it that month, you can put it on the full board. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't have to wait to go to committee, to be assigned to committee. And once you vote that it's gonna go on the future agenda, so I bring it up tonight in village board, I wanna put it on the agenda, the next meeting it can go to committee.
No,
Okay.
she's saying the next meeting, it's listed on the agenda.
No,
Then you vote.
you can,
You
no,
get 4 votes giving direction then.
no, that's
Then
not
that's
right.
another 2 weeks and it's on the committee agenda, unless you miss the committee agenda, then it's another 4 weeks before it's on your committee agenda.
Can I just explain though? So,
It's
So tonight-
it's an open meetings thing.
Can I explain?
I disagree. I think that, I disagree with that. I think and we've
Right,
always in the past said, here's item for future agenda, and we
No.
just voted then.
no, in item 2 future agenda, this is what Nathan told us, and this is what we did.
Very occasionally.
Tonight, I'm in future agenda items on the count, and I say, I would like to make a motion to put on a future agenda this topic, bus stops on Kensington. And Tammy says, trustee Bachor says, I second that, and they say, well, any discussion on that future agenda item, and you say, well, yes, this is just, I basically want to discuss putting some stops because somebody handicapped, fell down, and I felt really bad for them. And then they say, okay, all in favor say aye, we say aye, it passes by majority, the next agenda it can go on. That is,
I agree.
we've done that a million,
Well,
on the
what-
past.
What is staff doing? Then staff supposed to go,
It-
they're working on one project and then have to shift to an analysis
the
of
only-
Kensington.
I
I
get
hear
it.
where you're coming from, so what I was, here's where we had had some discussion, because trustee Warren, we were talking about the fact that future agenda items is many times at the end of the meeting, so a lot of times it's a topic that's mentioned, but there are a lot of times where I leave when something's mentioned, and I'm like, I wonder where they're going with that. There's like this need for, I'm like,
I'm just
assessing
saying
where
that's
that is.
Robert's rules, period. Now, does it mean that's?
I'm not disagreeing with Robert's rules, I'm just
Yeah.
looking for a mechanism to have that further dialogue and communication, because we are at a loss sometimes. Like we're working on other stuff, and it's a question I have, I'm like, how much time am I supposed to be putting into this or not putting into this?
But it would be the same if it originated at the committee. At least you're getting consensus from the board members that they're having enough information that they can vote to say they wanna explore it. That's as best as you're gonna get under the legislative process. Because at any point in time, 2 trustees can make a motion, someone can second it, and they vote.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
I think I have a suggestion that could resolve this. So, is there any reason why before Thursday, when we have the board agenda out, that we could just ask board members to submit, that if you have a future agenda item, to submit that to Rebecca, so that we have that up front and can agenda it as,
Just the
consider.
title?
Discuss.
Under
yeah.
future items.
Under future items of consideration, you would itemize out what those are. And then it would also allow staff a few days that if we needed additional context, that we could follow up with the trustee and understand a little bit what the workload management may be. And then that way too, when you have your meeting on Monday, then you can actually take action on it to either take it directly to the board or take it to a committee based on whatever the motion reads. And then, 2 weeks later, or when the committee next meets, you'd be able to run with it.
I do, I think, I like that idea, but I'd also like to leave it a little bit more,
Yeah.
informal. I'd like to also have the option, just
Okay.
understanding that you might not be able to provide advice in the moment, but just to also have the option to bring up stuff like we do today. I just don't wanna make it too formal and too restrictive.
And I think most of the time, anybody that puts future agenda items on there doesn't say for the next meeting. I was just using that as if it was so timely that you felt that your priority was way above everyone else's, you know, and there's a reason for it, then we respect each other, and
And
You
probably
can just
mention it ahead of time.
yeah, I mean, people will say, well, can it wait, or blah, blah, you know, in the discussion, and then it might just go on a list, and then Rebecca's gonna be the one that actually puts it together where it fits. She's the one that slots things in, so, I remind her, you know, like, we have those conversations, but she knows the workload more than anyone. So that's how it's been kind of working.
I'm open, again, a lot of this discussion is to also assure that everyone has a level of an agreed expectation.
I like the idea. If you have a specific thing you wanna bring up beforehand, it can be listed.
Out of
And
the
say
goodness.
for,
Really
for
helpful.
discussion,
It would be really helpful for me.
discussion and possible consideration, and also still have the open-ended, so when we go through a meeting and somebody comes before us and says this is an issue, we can then say, we wanna discuss that at the next board. So there's a combination of, but try to give you as much heads up to provide some thoughts so you can think about it.
I also, I would like to put on the agenda for future items that make it clear that the action we're taking is to put it on a future agenda,
Oh, yeah.
not that we're taking action
Right.
on that.
Yes.
Because for public, you know, I do
Yes.
like that
Right.
things are on an agenda either at committee or full board for a couple of times to allow the public to kind of catch on and do the research. So that's the one thing that I would be concerned about. So as long as it's similar to citizens to be heard, it's very clear that we won't be taking action that night. If there's some language
I
that's
actually wanna make
similar.
that even clearer.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Hmm.
even just looking at like tonight's agenda, the way, like even how things are listed on the consent agenda, it could be very similar to that. Just listed on the agenda, items for future consideration and just
that
listed
means.
right underneath. Yeah, and some sort of definition and listed right underneath there without a memo and
Right.
additional documentation to go through it, just that it's only to be discussed.
Yeah, and I don't think a memo is appropriate for a future item,
Right,
for
right,
consideration, so
Yep.
that wouldn't be required.
You can always, I mean, have conversations with either of us, and then we can fill the other person in, just so, at agenda meeting, so they know what it is when we put it on the agenda.
I think when Chris had that list, it was worthwhile too, because, and Mike used to always say, we have so many things on this list. But
I still keep it, because I mean, there's still ideas we're gonna wanna explore one day.
Right, but it's, you know, we know if we have 15 on them, that, you know, that we shouldn't keep throwing items on the list. On the other hand, if it's your committee and you feel like you really have something you wanna discuss, you should. But I think we do need to talk about Cal versus, standing committees and how we wanna organize that.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to move on unless there's, do you need anything more specific?
No,
from
that
us
was
on
it.
this? Okay, great.
Thank you.
So if we could, it looked like President Rozak had something to say.
Nope, I'm waiting.
Oh, you wanna
Waiting.
start?
Yep.
Jump in. Okay, so the memo laid out two general options, and then there was a committee structure proposal change from trustee Menta, and I just wanna say thank you for taking the time to lay that out. It's very clear, and the table was really helpful. And so what makes sense to proceed on this? Either manager, you all, or President Rozak?
You know, when I read them over, they are exactly the same structure, right, the two here, for policies. I just wanted to mention one thing. This policy says, it was written by staff to say we would adopt a policy number 8. There's actually policy number 8, there's policy number, like there's a bunch of policies that would have to be changed, so just so you know, so you're not shell-shocked one day when you see 3 coming before you that address the same thing. It's just because there's multiple places it's at in our policy manual. But if you look at the two, regardless, it's the same. The role of the village president is almost the same, the role of the trustee is almost the same. the actual, if it's a municipal area that you're assigned to, or a committee, they're exactly the same. So, some of the things that are just important to get consensus on as we walk through for either committee, either structure, is minutes, videotaping, and then what the committee or topic areas consist of. Because either, if we're gonna go to committee structure, but even if it's committee of the whole, it's gonna still need to know what does that topic area contain. So we may wanna start with the basics of the meeting and then go into the groupings.
The cow versus committee structure?
Like,
Is that what you're proposing?
well, for instance, like meeting minutes, videotaping in either way.
I would prefer to get a sense of cow
Okay.
and standing, just because that's been like the whole focus for the last
Okay.
few months, and then take the procedural or administrative.
If we should just go around, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm in favor of going back to committees. And in terms of scheduling committees, I think we need to I think once a month is not gonna be sufficient for public works for sure. For budget, probably not, and depending on what we continue to talk about at JPL. So I mean, I think the schedule, not that everything has to be scheduled every time, but I think there may be times we need to have concurrent meetings, and if we have, something at 4 committees, then we schedule, we just have to play that by ear. But I mean, I think occasionally we may need to have concurrent meetings, and that just may be how it goes. So that's my thought.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're going around.
You're like, damn it.
Wrong side of the road.
Pass!
Let's go the other way.
I think that cows, for me personally, has been a good introductory sort of experience for the board, but I think now moving into committees would be helpful to sort of divide up the workload a little bit. I think that might be beneficial, so I'm sort of leaning towards committees at this moment.
I really like Cal, but, I hear what, all the discussions that have happened. I do feel, I've always said that there's a need to have work groups in even CDA has work groups, like every committee ends up breaking up into work groups. So, I still struggle with scheduling. I will not vote for committees at the same time, scheduled at the same time, because now that I'm in this role, I can understand the administration, because I don't have any committee assigned to me, but I can't be in both. And so, I remember how frustrating that was when it would be Wilson Drive and, the marketing committee talking about Shorewood Today or something, and you wanted to be in both. And it really was frustrating, because you just rehashed it at the board when that happened. And it wasn't as transparent to the public, and it was hard on staff. So for that reason, I wouldn't want them concurrent ever. And I do feel there's value in, as Trustee Menta said, not having standing committees, but having committees, and when needed, you schedule them in the hours between 6 and 7:30. If it's committee of the whole that month, that time, Rebecca, somebody, as much as you decentralize, at some point, someone is a point person to have to put it together, and we're gonna have to trust that that's in good faith, and it's gonna be, if the 5 things that the staff, usually the agenda items come from staff, because it's like, we have this contract, we have to approve this RFP, the lifeguards, and most of the agenda items come up from administration. And if they need to go to budget and finance, that is scheduled for that time. If it can wait, because we already have 3 that are gonna happen, then we'll pick the one that can wait, and that committee will meet the next time. So
So you're saying, I think, can we just go around, because you're saying even if we vote that we wanna have committees and have them concurrently, you're not gonna schedule them, is that? 'cause
No,
that
no, no, I
sounds
said I
like what
was
you're
gonna
saying.
vote for it. If the, oh,
Okay.
the majority of the board votes for it, I have no, I mean,
Then, yeah, so I'm curious to,
Yeah.
to what you think about.
Because I've read this over, the cow has been work, I mean, we've had good discussions and had come out of here with consensus, but is work that needs to be done by committees, DPW, budget. I'd hate to lose the cow, but I think we need to move to some committee work too. Some, I don't know if the cow or the board assigns stuff. Essentially, it's to the board, we call it the cow, it's just saying the
Yeah.
board's gonna retain the issue and work on it.
You know, for me, it's an interesting question for me. I echo a lot of points made by President Rosick, in that, you know, I do like the cow. I think it's helped us to work well together. It's helped us to have open discussions and figure out where each other stand on different issues. I'm also sensitive though to the workload and kind of and being able to kind of farm things up to the committees and get things done. You know, also I do share the same concerns about scheduling, kind of the administrative things, concurrent sessions, things like that we would need to work through if we went away from the cow structure. You know, the only thing I wrote down was, you know, is there some sort of, you know, and I think this has been tossed around a little bit, a hybrid model that we could work towards. Because I do think there is value in the cow, I really do.
is the hybrid model what I kind of just stated, or what we're all, it's the as needed? So we have assigned committees?
We could throw in a variety of things, including having committee meetings for the first hour, let's say we start at 6, right? And then at 7 to 7:30 have cow. Because there could be things that are discussed in committee, and we're like, you know what, this would be better with the full board. Because we're gonna have a lot of questions anyway, can we, you know, either kick this to the cow? Or there might be things that are already on the agenda that are specifically for cow, but I don't know, maybe there were other iterations, but that's what I have
But
in
would it
mind.
be a
And that's what I would.
standing time? Because what if we had no ballot items,
Yeah.
and then you have a half an hour of nothing?
Well, I mean, we could start later, or we could.
I don't know if you'll ever have it.
I was gonna.
It's containing
What
it.
if we had an extra budget item or an extra committee item, and we didn't have a cow item that time? Would it be okay not to schedule?
Trustee
Yeah,
McCaig hasn't
let's-
had a
yeah.
chance to
Yeah.
say.
Let's hear.
I'm comfortable with moving back to standing committees, because the way that the policy was laid out, it addressed all the concerns that I had. It addressed, things that I thought we were gonna lose. It doesn't lose. So it accounted for all that conversation. So thank you very much for listening to all the input and, you know, tweaking a few things. As I read it, I saw that there was still room to pull a cow out if we need it. So I'm comfortable with the standing committees, and maybe I was just putting that phrasing in there, but I kind of read through it and there was no alarm that went off that said like, oh no, we won't be able to do da 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 da. I saw enough direction with enough flexibility that we have that 6 to 7:30 time that can be delegated however's best to get the work done. And as far as the committees, how they're assigned, I really like how that's laid out, and maybe that's what we've had all along, and
Are you talking
so
about
long.
the three groupings?
What's that?
Are you talking about the groupings?
Yeah.
So if we go to that, I just
Oh.
want, I'd have to reappoint people just because.
Oh,
right now-
that's fine.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, as far as the groupings, that's fine. I don't have any concerns about that. I meant what topics go to each committee. Just if we consider Trustee Amenta's proposal, there are just a couple things that weren't exactly, you know, I couldn't find them both places, but I know that could be worked out. So I'd be open to that as well. But I'm definitely would say committee with cow when we need it. Okay, so.
The
yes.
board considers for future consideration, that might be an opportunity to say, that's probably an item we wanna take up
Exactly.
in cow.
Yeah.
No, that, just send that to
Yeah.
Public Works and let them
Again,
work through it. It's,
yeah,
wait,
formalizing these processes allow to get that input in a much more efficient way.
yeah.
I would hesitate to make determinations at the board level on what committee it goes to, because I think that we need to give some deference to our administrator to give her time to determine what you know, pieces need to go into it, and then, you know, it may make sense that it goes to the committee that we talked about, or it may make sense it goes to committee of the whole. We can suggest something, but
Well, I thought the purpose of laying out what goes where was to try to resolve that. And I'm sure that there'll be exceptions, but I thought that that was part of the problem that we had in the past,
So-
was that it wasn't consistent.
can I just show you guys something really quick? This is all committee work, okay? And this was done back in 17, and what Tyler will verify is that no matter, that we have an ordinance, we have a policy that lays out what goes to what. We may want to change it and restructure it, which we can do now to make it more efficient or make more sense to our group. But in the end, President Johnson and Chris Schwartz, Manager Schwartz, had to make a call most of the time, because you talk about parking, we had a long talk, public safety, and I said, nope, that's going to be parking enforcement, this is parking policy. Well, I want it to go to Public Works. So, there's gonna be a lot of gray area, no matter how many, I've done 15 versions of what makes sense to assign places, and it's still not black and white, there's a lot of gray.
Well, I think the proposal of the policy was that we enact, whatever we decide on, that we try it as a policy for the remainder of the year, and then, or several months or whatever. There was a point at which we're not gonna jump into changing the ordinance, which I think is great. That also made me very comfortable.
And it's not in the ordinance, right? It is in the policy. The layout of what goes to what is policy number 8.
Okay, so we went around, we got through that. It sounds like standing committee, going to committee and scheduling them. Great, do you have enough, is that enough?
So just some clarification, because Tammy's concept of 1 hour for committees and then half hour for cow, if not, like,
I mean, that's.
no, I never thought about it that way, so when you said it, I was like, oh, okay, that's a different version, so,
But what if it's AIM? And you wanna bring it to Cal, that's an hour conversation.
if it's game.
AIM, or the AMI.
Oh, AMI, okay.
I'm just thinking reset, like,
Yeah.
if you wanna bring it to Cal and it's gonna be more than half an hour, do we have the flexibility to do that?
The policy also indicated that there could be a special meeting outside of Monday nights if necessary, and that's why I like the policy too, because Trustee Amenta had talked about how in Whitefish Bay, they have a separate night for Public Works, like Public Works Palooza. I think that makes a lot of sense at times, not regularly, but at times. And it would be posted with enough notice. We know what that workload looks like, we know what projects are coming down, it's almost like a cycle, an annual cycle. So you could say that once a quarter, you pretty much are sure there's gonna be a Public Works Palooza night. And then the public knows, the board knows, staff knows, and things are kind of geared that way. And that would be another meeting management.
I think SIC too, I really like the idea of having SIC untethered, because
Yeah.
then you're not like looking at the clock and,
The
and because.
nature of the work is.
Right, SIC, for example, could be tasked with revamping prioritization and how to do that,
Mhm.
but not to have the time pressure.
Right.
Meetings starting at 10, yeah.
Absolutely, no, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think we'd actually be more efficient.
So your special meeting could be for the committee discussion, not for board, not special board meetings. Because
Right.
obviously that could be, if we were gonna do that, then we'd really have to look at a really solid.
And that-
No, it's the
so here's
committee,
my-
and so they have control over it.
Yeah.
So, it's gonna, that brings up the point of who calls a special meeting of a committee. Rebecca and I went over this too, before this meeting. So for a board meeting, a special board meeting, it's 2 trustees, you file it with the clerk, it's in our ordinances of how it gets done and then it gets noted, but so if you're decentralizing the workload to committees, but you're keeping some centralization of agenda management, I'm making a strong request that there are gonna be times we don't want to have to schedule a cow outside a regular board meeting, because we have the time. Like, we don't have enough committee
Yeah,
work.
we were talking about
During a special committee meeting.
I know, I'm just saying, so if we're not flexible in allowing us to schedule what committees have worked that time, and if a cow goes to an hour rather than a half an hour, then we're forced to make you go into a special board meeting sometime else because we need a whole hour for it. So when we write this up, I'm asking for that flexibility of, we have workload decentralization. If you're on the budget committee, you're gonna be meeting, you know, it's just giving us the flexibility to say, okay, well, these three are really timely, and so we need to do public work as a budget this week, you know, and then next week we can do a the next time, just knowing what the lists look like. Rebecca has them planned out for the whole year.
That's, to my point, that's why I think special meetings shouldn't be that much of an issue. You can kind of anticipate what makes sense.
I just don't wanna have to call a special meeting because we've been rigid in our time slots.
Well, I don't think we're not,
Yeah,
I
We
don't
aren't
think we
looking
decided
forward to
that
lunch.
we don't have to have a cow. I mean, I think we have 6 to 7:30,
and
and depending on what's a committee issue and what's a cow issue, I mean, if we don't have something that has to be talked about the cow, we don't have to have a cow.
Okay, that's what I think
and
we
you
were
can have
discussing.
more
Okay.
committee time.
Yeah.
Based upon some of the discussion tonight, it would be helpful because I didn't know what was gonna, this meeting or not. So managing that schedule, it is intense. So one of the things that I would like an opportunity to do is to take whatever feedback we come out with tonight and actually take
Yeah.
those work plans and what happens.
What that
and,
look like.
and
Yeah.
right against this criteria and say, oh, okay, because that will take some thinking through.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it'll be a really helpful exercise for
Yeah.
me. And then if I have questions,
Right.
Yeah.
right, or there are areas or projects that, you know, like we've said, there's gonna be these ones that we wanna
Yeah.
meet together, or,
Yeah.
you know, whatever. I can pose those out to say, you know,
Mhm.
I'm doing a pulse check on,
Yeah.
on these subjects because I thought,
Right.
you know, maybe those, but it will be, it'll,
I mean, I don't understand though why this is, you know, so different. I mean, it's still the board. It's just a decision-making process that rather than discussing everything all together all the time, subgroups of us will discuss things maybe twice, really work out the kinks, and then bring it to the whole group. It's just a change in the process of our discussion. I don't see how it changes your work plan in any way.
It allows more things to be explored, I think, a little bit, because you don't have all
Well, I
7.
I wasn't implying that it was more
Yeah.
so like how to divide it out so everyone knew what a level to anticipate for different topics.
Right.
Because there's some item, there might be an item which I'm like, oh, okay, that would go to the standing committee, that the board would pull back on and say, no, that maybe be something that we all want
Yeah.
to be involved
Yeah, I
in.
think that's.
So it's kind of like an affirmation for me.
At a certain point, a couple of years ago, the draft agenda on Tuesday went out to the entire board. And if you had an issue, like why isn't my issue on here or whatever, then that's an opportunity for us to get back to you on Tuesday and say, I think that should be in a cow, or I mean,
Yeah.
someone, obviously the village president has to make a decision, but, we can at least have some feedback at that point on what the committee agendas are and the scheduling and if it should be cow or committee.
I just want an opportunity also at that point to inform you though of those things that are necessary for time on the project. Because there's a reason why we've gone through a process of planning out the year, is because there's a method behind that to kind of get us accomplished on time and to meet deadlines so we can be prepared for the next step. So I'm just sharing that.
I guess, yeah, I would like to frame what you just shared as additional feedback for tonight, and I'd still like to give Rebecca the opportunity to kind of take all this and see what it would look like. And I think that'll be helpful for us because we've got some questions too, there's, so I think unless there's additional feedback from trustees who haven't spoken, I think if you have what you need to kind of take that next step to say, what would this look like, since we're consensus.
I think I had one general one, but other than that, okay. But I can wait.
What I didn't get clarity on, two
Mhm.
things. One is, I wanted to pass this out, I had given it to Tyler before, and we got mixed up, and it's not typed up, but it is taking trustee Menta's and just putting what I had done in 17 into those categories, so I don't want that to get lost.
Oh,
So it just
sure.
has so if you could just take one of each.
Mhm.
And then, we didn't finalize whether we're okay with how it's presented, and this brings up meeting minutes and video, okay,
Thanks for
but,
coming back to that.
is it okay, they're not gonna be concurrent, or they are gonna be, like, I didn't get
that's-
consensus on that,
Yeah, that's kind of my main.
because that'll
The
determine
way I
how,
read it was that they would not be concurrent,
I don't know.
and
Exactly.
in the policy, that it wasn't gonna be concurrent. And, I support that, and trustee Amenta made the point of that it may happen that we need it. And I would just say, I think the majority of the group, the consensus is we don't want that to happen. And if we feel like that's the only choice, it would be a very rare occurrence, but we would know ahead of time. You know, we're just, at this point, we've worked so hard to be proactive, I don't see any reason why we would be in that kind of squeeze, you know? Unless, I don't know, I can't think, I don't wanna think of anything.
Yeah, I would second that, you know, make sure they're not concurrent both, so the trustees can attend, any session they want, and the public, and we can record, and we can take minutes, I just wanna make sure that we have one of those things.
So that brings up because it makes it easier, because we can record, just like if it was a Cal meeting,
Correct.
6 to 7:30, we would be recording anyways. So we can keep that transparency, and we also then can have the clerk take the minutes. Otherwise, if we do concurrent, we'd need trustees to take the minutes and take them off.
That's
So
correct.
no need.
Right, I mean, we addressed minutes at one point, and Nathan said that we probably didn't need minutes because whatever we discussed in committee came to the full board, so our
Yeah.
attorney has said we don't need minutes.
I know, I whipped out that memo, and we really weren't following what you need to do at board in order for us to avoid minutes. I mean, if the
Oh,
meeting
to
is.
report it,
If you,
committee, yeah, right.
I mean, it's noticed
So-
as a public meeting, it's an open meeting, and if the clerk's taking minutes for committee of the whole, she can take minutes for meetings, I mean, committee meetings, it's the same as what we're doing now, it's just, it would be a budget committee rather than
I mean, if they're not okay, what's the difference if, I mean, the only difference is if it's a finance meeting and it's not stuff you feel like talking about, you don't have to go. But other than that, if we don't hold them concurrently, then it is just like a sequential cow. I don't know, I just, you know, I mean, I'm not gonna argue about it, but,
I kind of agree. If they aren't concurrent, you're just kind of,
Right.
the other group can't be working. The idea is to split the work, but we
Yeah.
only have one, we're coming at different times, or we're sitting in on meetings and we're doing the cow another way, committees
If we
with
don't have a
cow.
lot to do, then it won't be a problem, but if we have a lot to do, we're gonna need to split up into committees anyway. and
we
have
can
concurrent
always
meetings.
have, just like we're doing now, I mean, let's see, there's a RFP that needs to be done. We have an ad hoc committee, the public works chair sat on, I mean, we've been holding ad hoc meetings or special meetings on a Saturday, we're gonna do one for capital planning. The flexibility is very nice to me, like, and it would be at the call of the chair, talking to Rebecca and myself, and just saying, yeah, let's call a special meeting, we need more time for that, you know, the chair can always say that. You always have that authority to have more meetings.
Sure, but we also have a limited amount of time, so I would hate to be excluded from special meetings because, you know, 4 members can meet during the day, or it's a Saturday and I have, you know, my kid's mock trial competition, or this and that. I mean, we have these regular board meetings that we, you know, are in our calendar and have been for a long time. So I understand, and sometimes a special meeting is necessary, especially if there's a time-sensitive issue. But I think that we've been a lot more disciplined and can keep our meetings shorter. And, you know, so not just this, you know, throwing it out there that we can have special meetings here. I really don't wanna go down that road. And I wanna respect everyone's time here, and also future board members. We don't want this to be only a, you know, position that people who don't have full-time jobs can do. I agree.
I mean, we could have, like Whitefish Bay does Public Works on, I think, every other Thursday night. I mean, we could have a couple committees, but then you wouldn't have to come till 7:30 on Mondays, you know?
Well,
So
what is
you would
that?
come at 7:30 on Mondays, but come on Thursday, if you were on that group of committees, you would have every other Thursday, you know, then you could, so we could split them that way if we want to take a separate chunk of time somewhere.
I'm proposing that we go for concurrent meetings at times when necessary. I
We
mean,
have to, if we
yeah,
have enough
I mean,
work, then we have to.
right,
I
and we
guess
can handle it, and if we need to
Yeah.
bring it to full board, and which we're going to have to do
have to do
anyway.
anyhow, exactly.
And it's just, that's part of the trust process and, you know, learning to work together. And
Well, then in that situation, if that's the way it's gonna go, I don't know what staff's gonna do, but, if you need staff involved. But we could either do them concurrently and videotape, I don't know if we want 2 videotapes going, that's twice as much work for Tyler,
Sarah.
Sarah,
Yeah,
and then one of the
unfortunately for Sarah.
trustees, we just have to rotate taking minutes, and then typing them up and putting them in the file, getting them to
Well,
Sarah.
I heard we don't have to have minutes and we don't have to videotape. So, I mean, that's the other that's the
True,
other
we
option.
could go back that way.
Can we rewind? Can we actually avoid concurrent meetings when, I mean, can we say, can you take the direction to avoid concurrent meetings when possible, but if, you know, if it's really necessary, we'll figure out some way to,
I would go the other route and say the assumption is we're gonna have concurrent meetings. When possible, we won't have that, or we'll have the cow.
Then I want to talk about transparency, because I think the public really does enjoy, at least I've heard a lot of feedback that they do enjoy the fact that they're videotaped and there's minutes for committee meetings, and I know that was a big push when we started this whole conversation.
I think that we're all for transparency, but we have to respect, as you guys have said, the staff's time. If this is twice as much
I'm just
time
saying
for
we can
Sarah.
accomplish it.
No, I'm just.
Even with concurrent meetings, we have 2 video cameras. We all have a pen, so I mean, we can accomplish transparency and have concurrent meetings. I'm just wondering if that's acceptable.
I don't think any elected official should be tasked with taking the minutes just because of the nature of the work. I mean, I would have a staff member take minutes if we were gonna do it at all.
Okay.
But
What if we did really succinct,
Just-
like this was what was
They
discussed
discussed.
and, you know, like just a couple sentences?
at the end of the day, there's politics, guys, so.
Well, that's
We
true
have
too.
talked about, a template to provide, because we have like a number of subcommittees
For
and
committees.
things, who meet, and so we're
If we
providing.
have video, we don't need minutes.
Well, and the
Well, if we
liaison,
don't
but
need it for the
the staff
committee.
liaisons assigned are all different people.
I would like to
So,
propose that we
so
do
there's
this.
no, so there's always, it's Public Works Director, Clerk, Tyler, Mark, Chief Nimmer, and Bart. So Rebecca is not on any of those. So we're always
Neither
gonna
am
have a
I, I'm
staff
on that
person
committee.
there. And in addition, Rebecca can be at any one she wants to be. And so can Allison. You just can't be at 2 at the same time. I mean, I just feel like, you know, your desire to be at every single committee meeting,
Oh, that's amazing.
if that's, I just don't feel that our entire process should be hung up on your need to feel that you're in every single.
I don't want to be in every single one, I'm just, I've never liked concurrent committee meetings, so that's not, it's nothing to do with this position, it's nothing to do with, this has just always been going through 2 years of committees, I've never liked concurrent committee meetings. So,
Well, I'm okay with doing a Thursday night, you know, doing some committees on a separate night.
2 nights a week is still too
I
many,
know,
no matter
I
how
don't
you
think
slice
it's-
it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm gonna go for not having an extra night. I think that we can do it. I'm fine with, there's some things that might be discussed in the other set of, you know, committee, whatever. I think that we can handle it. We have a lot of work to do. We have, a very lean budget, so let's get it done. And I hear you'd like to be, I mean, some of us would like to be at 2 things, but in an ideal world, we'd have copious amounts of time and money, and could do it all.
I just don't,
Is there a way to group the topics so that, and the committees, so that one group of staff is in committee with the committee? You know, their staff isn't running back and forth. Does
I
that
think
make
it's
sense?
mostly just the
It's,
manager, it's just them.
It's not possible.
Can you
I
guys
don't think
divide
it's
and conquer?
possible. Like, so a perfect example is with the JP&L committee, personnel. So anytime we have a authorization to hire some, or something like that, everyone has personnel, right? So
Right.
everyone would be part of that
Department head.
committee. And like, you know, for me, for instance, with my son, sometimes a standing committee or a volunteer committee may have a proposal to bring forward to the board, like the conservation committee. So typically their proposals go to the public works committee.
Right.
So that would be an example, I have to go to public works, or pet and bike safety might have something that's infrastructure related. So
Thank you.
It's kind of impossible to avoid that.
Mhm.
So that's just a juggling act that for staff that we would have to try to find a way to work around.
Mm.
We tried to do it our best last time, but there sometimes it was kind of, I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of
Yeah.
stressful. So,
I do think that in this whole discussion, there are a couple of kind of loose ends to tie up here. And I'm speaking specifically about, videotaping and minutes where we ultimately come down on those. I mean, that does impact how I feel about which way we move here. Even if we do, I understand that if we videotape, there's arguably, there's lesser of a need for minutes, but maybe even something we could, maybe some really brief, discussion on, so somebody would know where they would want to go to in the video. Yeah.
Motion, 2, 1.
Sure, if we can strip all kind of descriptors and
Just
stuff
say,
like that
received
from
written
it.
report from staff, committee directed staff to proceed with.
If there's any
draft.
reports attached, then that's right.
Sure, I mean, so just based on what's in the ordinance as far as
So, like,
what the minimum amount.
Yeah, I think Rebecca said she'd provide a template so that it would be.
Yeah, I think it would be easy to provide a template. I have, and Tyler's gonna be more familiar with this than me, but I had significant concerns with Sarah about multiple videotapes that night. She had said that would be overly cumbersome to video concurrent meetings. And I just wanna get I've heard that very strongly, so I tend to lean towards the template for minutes.
Yeah.
That we could provide everybody, and then there would just be a different expectation, in terms of what would come out on there.
Can I ask something more? I always like to do things, we've been doing really well with doing things in steps, rather than taking a big change. So I hear that everybody wants more ownership, we want more time to work on certain topics. That can all be accomplished by getting committees back. Can we try to let Rebecca and I schedule them so they're not concurrent if possible? And because if that's possible by the workload, we're not drowning in workload right now. I mean, I know everyone, it feels like we have but I mean, we have it managed and we could even get more accomplished by going to committees.
Rebecca has a work plan with all this stuff that we as a group have not ever really discussed or commented on. So, I feel there's a huge omission in terms of our input as a board into it's great that she's organized things in so much detail. However, we have been
But that's agenda setting.
we have been lacking.
But again,
So
let's
to
refocus
your
for a
point that we don't have that much to do, it's like the train has left the station and we are, as a board, are standing back here waving.
But if we go to committees and at board, you say, I wanna put this on a future agenda, and it goes, I'm just saying, the scheduling of what the board wants, meaning slotting it in and juggling that scheduling, so that we don't have to have concurrent meetings if we don't need to. Can we start there? If it starts to get like, wow, we have all these things coming down from the board, we'll know right away, like, we can't get this done.
Well, I would have liked to have had a meeting on January 26th, and we all discussed that, and, but now we're not, that's not happening now.
We need to finish
So,
those.
that would have been great to have scheduled, but it's not.
I think we do need to wind down this conversation. Would it be helpful to go around the room and take a vote on starting incrementally, or do you have another proposal?
No, it's not scheduled for a vote, but hearing some consensus so
yes.
that I could start working
Yeah,
on whatever you'd like.
Can I ask one question? So if we were having multiple meetings at the same time, would we be able to confirm that we would not have more than 2 meetings at one time, so that way there could be 2 videos happening at the same
There
time?
can't be more
Oh,
than
yeah.
2, because
So, okay.
there's only 2 groups of trustees, so you never go, you're gonna be like, but I have to reassign committees now. So that could come at the next meeting if we wanted it to, or whenever, because right now the groupings are not the groupings that are in here. So there's 3 grouping, you're on 3 committees, those 3 could be scheduled, and concurrently, those other groups can be scheduled, but you can never,
You chair a committee and you sit
you
in
can't
on
be
the
at
other
2
two.
different ones.
Okay. Well, I think we should try to have concurrent as much as, so we can contain it as tight into one night. And and we can figure out the minutes, maybe the chair, or somebody can just keep simple minutes of what's been done and report out to the board.
And would they be like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but would they be scheduled like how we used to do it? So on Monday night from 6 to 7:30, you know, it goes budget, the three.
Not necessarily, unless there was, I think, we need to manage that, unless the chair, you know, if we're working on, say, Tammy's legalization, and we wanna spend some time on
Not
it,
that I'm getting credit for
you
that.
know.
Right?
You're gonna want
Shorewood,
a half
voted for
hour,
it.
40 minutes. That was one of the frustrations before, is you had like all three, and you were just going like this, and you'd go 4 or 5 meetings and only work little bit,
I know
never
that's-
really in one pass dealt with the
Right.
thing and got it done,
So has that, then that's allowing flexibility. We can do it concurrently if needed, but it's allowing Rebecca and I to sit down and say,
Let's keep going around the
Okay.
room. I know, I understand
I just wanted to
from your
ask because
perspective, yeah.
I didn't know, I don't know what that meant.
Mm-hmm. Trustee Warren? It sounds like a compromise. Should I just say what I think a compromise would be?
Go ahead and see it.
And it's kind of getting to a hybrid. And, yeah, I think what makes the most sense is to go with how the policy lays it out, is where there's flexibility that the items and the committee's times are scheduled according to, you know, a logical work plan, that COW is used when it's needed during that 6 to 7:30 time. And I think, and a template minutes, I think is a good solution. As far as scheduling them concurrently, I guess I'm not convinced that the work can't get done, without scheduling concurrently, because I haven't seen it. So I think just assuming that it won't work to schedule them, you know, 3 one night and 3 another night is, you know, maybe shorting us of some time. Process. I guess I don't really have a hybrid.
Does it have to be those three? So let me just say it again. So say all of a sudden we start working on legalizing marijuana, okay? And we're working on the transportation study, and we're working on organizational management, okay? So we have JP&L going on, needing to go on. We have Public Works, and we have, what was the other one? Community Business Relations. If we do it the way the policy states right now, how we used to do it, those slots, then we have to fill them with agenda items, because those committees we could use that time for another, so one Monday, we schedule those 3, and the next meeting Monday, 6 to 7:30, if there's nothing on strategic initiatives and no one on the board put it on future agenda items and we don't have enough staff time to do it, then Rebecca and I would schedule another.
Well, we didn't always schedule 3 and 3.
Yeah, you need that flexibility.
You need it because
Yeah.
you might need
Yeah.
more time for the transportation study.
Yeah.
Right, so this year it will be transportation, next year it
So
may
the
be
committee will be
some
meeting,
same other item.
And then
Yeah.
in the organizational study, you know, it might be next year, it might be resource management, now all of a sudden we're going to, you know, the built environment or whatever the committee may be. So that's the flexibility I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's what I'm expecting, is that
Because
there'll be
the board will
flexibility.
decide what those agenda items would be.
I just think I think it, for Public Works and budget and also JP&L, I don't see one meeting a month. I just don't see one meeting a month. There's too much stuff, regular stuff going on with those, you know?
Just a point of clarification, so one thing that used to, or this, I was informed of this before, so anything that came onto the board agenda needed to go through a committee agenda. And I just don't think that's
No, I don't
needed.
think that's true. I
Okay,
think things go
good.
directly to
Okay,
the board.
because I'm gonna come from that
Yeah, all the
perspective,
time.
because I
It's
just,
fine.
it's a lot of redundancy that's not necessary.
If it was generated by one of us, it often went to committee, or if it was an idea for someone in the community, but
That's
staff was
exactly.
able
If
to
it was a
put to full
board
board.
initiative.
Okay,
time.
okay,
I
good,
think, I
that's helpful.
just do want to say, and I know we're running out of time, I think part of the problem we had with was the way the committees were structured, and there were some that had a lot less to do than others. So I think it would be great for SIC to start looking at that and maybe rebalancing committees. And I could see like 4 meeting from 6 to 7:30. but not all 6, but maybe, you know, 4 or 3 if there's not necessity for the other 3.
So like the transportation study, we all know it's gonna take more time. So if we don't have those slots available for DPW, for the Public Works to meet both Mondays, we're gonna need a special meeting at
Why
some point.
wouldn't you have slots for them to meet every Monday? Why can't they meet every
But
meeting?
because Rebecca, if she's now working on an SIC initiative, and her staff is, because now we have to meet, because SIC is a standing
Don't
committee.
have to
No,
meet.
we don't have to.
SIC does not have to
No,
meet
we don't have
unless,
to come up with more.
No.
yeah, we're
We've had
not,
plenty of times
Right, you
where
just
you haven't
schedule
had things.
whatever,
Yeah.
work,
is
the board
most
initiatives are.
pressing.
Yeah, the
Right.
board,
and that gives the time to get the work done.
Well, and I hope that staff is working on more than one thing at a time.
Yes, I'm sure they're working on many things.
I don't understand, this whole conversation I'm finding puzzling.
Well, I think we're trying to account for every
Yeah,
single
we're getting
situation, and I would really, I'd like to seek consensus on starting with the way it's laid out. 6 to 7:30 is committee time. Schedule it by committee, whatever needs to get done.
And or
And-
how,
And
depending
then
on.
we check in 3
As
months.
board.
Based on the board.
Based on the board's
priorities.
action.
The videotaping, and I know Taylor's not, but I have heard Sarah's, the
Yeah, I
concurrent
don't,
is not going to work. So
Yes.
we are happy to provide a template and
Yes.
with some expectation that this
I
is a
think-
brief.
I would like to see us start with that, and
And
we'll
we'll
check in.
Try not to have concurrent meetings unless,
Sure.
right?
Yeah,
And then that won't be a
Yeah.
problem. I don't want. to
Right,
be
so
able to
could
do
we
it.
just get,
Yeah, that's.
is there consensus for starting there and
Yeah.
checking in 3 to 4 months on the?
Yes, I do
Okay.
think we do.
So that's,
Okay.
I'm going to,
Is
I
this
really
for
think we need to
February
adjourn to
4th?
start with our.
Okay, well, I
Or
wanna
did-
know
or
what
should
the,
we
I have
vote
to
on
schedule
something
something,
They don't,
that we need to talk about what the committees are. So that, I just wanna
No,
say
yeah,
that,
we
so that's
do.
the next
Yes,
time we
that's
talk,
what
is going to be
Maybe,
what was
right.
just passed around, what trustee Menta had put together. We got basic, you know, the outline, but now we just have to formalize what those committees are, so I can reappoint people.
there's not a vote, but I think it would be, because it's not listed for that, we don't do that in the Cal. However, I think it's fair to start, trying
Doing the
to implement this for the next meeting. Everyone understanding that this is a work in progress.
It's a work in
yeah.
We're gonna be
progress.
trying, we'll be trying, right?
We're all a work in progress.
And then
know,
we'll
right?
continue to kind of lean into that.
Can we go back to the old committees, communications related
Yeah.
to public safety, but then I think discuss this in SIC. I think
Yes,
this is a
I
great
think
Good
that's
idea.
great.
Right.
SIC,
Well,
well, start
think
talking
about
about
it.
this in
Yeah.
more detail.
There are
And
things that are
updating the
still.
policies in
All right,
SIC.
well,
Just
then I'll
because I
just-
don't need to discuss it.
Doesn't matter, I just decided to do
I
whatever.
have this,
If that's not, no, this is not,
Right.
if we're going back to the that's fine.
Second.
That's based on her.
So I have a motion to
So
adjourn.
there's this one, if we're going back to the old one.
Second.
That is.
All those in favor of adjourning the cow?
There you go. Can you make copies of
Aye.
that for me?
Aye. Leslie voted no.
If we're going back to regular
Sorry, I
committees,
got
I'm passing out.
Oh, no,
the-
sure.
No more discussion.
Kind of, you don't sound good.